Abortion happens every day. Millions of people around the world will have an abortion each year. But the majority of those people will never talk about their abortion experiences. What if millions of people broke their silence and told the truth about their lives and their choices? This is Melissa Madera in Toronto, Canada, and you're listening to the Abortion Diary podcast. These are the stories we share.
So I grew up in Orange County, California, and I grew up in a moderately Republican family with a mother who was a nurse and did not grow up in an atmosphere of judgment or censure as it related to the female body and what they did with it. And this is what allowed me to regard abortion as a viable option for making sure I didn't have kids. And a lot of times people find it really surprising that you can come of age in a Republican family in Orange County, California, because it's, supposed to be the hellmouth of Republicanism. But really, when I was growing up in America, the dialogue around abortion had just not become tainted yet. And in any case, my family had moderate opinions about things. And we also tend towards lots of women. So you had kind of a functioning matriarchy. And most importantly, I think, is the fact that my mom is a nurse. She was an RN in Ohio, and she moved out to California and, dropped her license, but never really lost that perspective. So when I was growing up, I heard straight talk about the female body and female sexuality. There just wasn't a lot of craziness. Like I didn't have like slang names for my vagina, and I knew where my uterus was and all these things. And so I didn't grow up with judgment. I didn't grow up with a lot of censure. I don't think they'd be happy to know that I had more than one abortion, but they weren't, they were not very judgy people. They were just kind of pragmatic, middle class people. My dad owned a bookstore and there were 5 of us. And, I think about these things because I have had 4 abortions, and we don't actually know if that's a lot, because if stigma has silenced women and prevented them from really talking openly about their abortions, that could be a goal. That could be a median, that could be a middle point for all we know. But in general, it's regarded as a lot, you know what I mean? And it's something that I've consciously suppressed because I don't want to be judged. I certainly don't want to be killed. I want people to talk to me. There's a lot of fear that comes up with revealing it. So I think about the way I came of age and how I was constructed as a human being, and how that relates to having a pretty relaxed attitude towards having abortions. I guess, so my first one was in Newport Beach, and it was because I was a dumb 18-year-old who, her boyfriend didn't use birth control and I didn't use birth control. And that's what happens. I mean, most of the women I know who have had abortions didn't use birth control. So I had an abortion, and it wasn't a big deal. There were no screamers outside of the clinic. It was almost in a weird way. And again, this is the kind of thing, if this falls into the wrong hands, people will just scream, but it was almost like a rite of passage. I didn't grow up in a family that observed or, made observance of the changes that one's body goes through. And I knew that this was a big deal. It was a big adult deal. I had fucked up undoubtedly, but I was also making a decision for myself and banking that it was the right decision, one that I could live with. And I turned out to be right. I didn't tell my mom, because I didn't feel like burdening her with that. And it wasn't any of her business. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. It was my body. It was my business. I was 18. This is what happened. And it was ludicrous to think at that point that I would have the child. The thing that I was the most conscious of, I remember this really clearly. The emotion I was most clear on was this sense of love for the child that would be after it was born. I did feel love for it. I felt love for the idea that would later become a reality. And I felt intensely protective of it. And I just knew that it was not going to there was just no way I was going to have a child. And I also felt intimidated. I couldn't have said this at the time. I felt intimidated at the intimacy that parent-child relationship represented. It's one of the most intimate relationships I think that you can have, having a child. And that was intimidating beyond measure, to think of being able to be in that kind of intimate, close relationship with another person. It was beyond me. This is what is meant by immaturity. When you're immature, you can't stand in super, super, super close quarters with someone emotionally or psychically. And you need to know that. And I'm incredibly happy I listened to myself. So I thought a lot about that. And so that was in 84. And it was a mundane experience. It was totally mundane. And I felt no regret afterwards. It wasn't especially painful. And the only reason it's dramatic now is because there are people out there that want to criminalize abortion who are interested in making it a dramatic story. But what is notable about my experience with abortion is how really non-dramatic it is. The only reason anyone even thinks to ask, is there drama, is there, this thing, is there this depth to it, is because someone has decided that it's in their best interest to make it so. But I bet there's a lot of women out there that think like, I'm being asked, I'm pushing into this experience, but really it was kind of mundane, which doesn't mean that it makes no sense, that it wasn't a thing that you thought about, but there's just a mundanity to the body and the workings of the body and the maintenance of the body. And an abortion fit into my maintenance of my body more than it fit into the notion of me becoming a mother, which is like the natural thing to do. So what I think of next is how quickly the political atmosphere in America changed after 1984. And I like to think I would have noted it anyway had I not had an abortion. Obviously, having an abortion gave me a sensitivity to the political landscape. I do know that I became more conscious of Roe v. Wade afterwards. And I do know that I started my ear just started getting cocked, towards, the news in this way. I would begin to notice the rumblings from the right about abortion. And of course, Ronald Reagan came into office, which was a frickin' nightmare. And so I began to pick up on this stuff, and it was really clear by 1988 that the shit was just hitting the fan. And obviously it was obvious because, Operation Rescue started, all of the clinics started being besieged. And what I remember about that time is the velocity of change. It was like the zombies were, pouring onto the streets, and all of a sudden you were like, there's zombies on the street. And they're everywhere, and everything is changing really fast. The velocity and the rapidity of the change was astonishing, and I can appreciate that now, almost being 50, really looking back at it. And it was, from 84 to like, I think even 85 or 86, it was like totally, it just turned over. The next time I went to an abortion clinic, I was actually taking a friend, and it was the same abortion clinic, same women's health clinic. I use the term abortion clinic sometimes, like Elizabeth, they do more than give abortions, but whatever, we're in casual conversation. And I have to take her to the same clinic. And we showed up to the same clinic and, suburban Newport Beach, everything's quiet and sterile. And there's all these crazy people out in front, like zombies. And it was like night and day. And we had to push my friend through the crowd, and someone stepped in front of her and said, "Don't kill your baby." And it was awful. I was irate. I pushed my friend in the clinic, grabbed a piece of paper out of some man's hand, balled it up and threw it in his face and said, "Don't get," I was just outraged. I was outraged. It was the craziest thing I'd ever seen. And I was like, okay, this is how it is now. This is happening. And so what's interesting to me, really to me, what the story is not about my abortions as much as what is it that shapes your consciousness and what is it that urges you into habitual activity around a specific issue. Because there are a lot of women who have had abortions who have never shown up for nothing They haven't done a thing to secure the rights of other women. They haven't signed petitions. They don't show up to clinics to help escort. They don't do, you know what I'm saying? Like, what is it that shapes people into taking action? It isn't just the act of abortion. There's something else. So I flash forward. I moved to San Francisco in 1991, and I was pregnant when I moved up here because I had sex without birth control. And at that time, the Operation Rescue tactics, like what they were doing at clinics, was in full swing, and it was god awful. People, I mean, it was just terrible. I cannot remember if Bernard Slepian had been killed by then, or who had been killed by then, but it was obvious that it was kind of dangerous, that it felt dangerous to me. And the really horrifying thing to me, of course, was people showing up with video cameras at clinics, at Planned Parenthood, and were videotaping women walking into the clinics. This was the first onset of the surveillance culture that America has since developed. And I, again, was outraged, and I thought, I'm not clear why this isn't illegal, but in any case, you're not going to get my picture. So I opted to have an abortion at home in my apartment, because I think I was 5 weeks, and, it was sterile. It was a self-help group. It was simple. It was easy. It was excruciatingly painful. It turns out I have had an illegal abortion while Roe v. Wade was legal, which is interesting. And it hurts. It hurts a lot. It makes the pain management of abortion extremely important. I completely get it. Pain is on kind of a continuum. I mean, some people have a very high pain threshold. I don't know if I have a high pain threshold, but I do remember being impressed at how really fucking painful it was. And that informs that firsthand knowledge, that bodily memory of pain, and how central it is to women's reproductive experiences heretofore, before pain management, has really impressed me. In a way, I did something archaic. I had an illegal abortion, which was painful, in a major United States city. And almost in a way, it's like, when I think about it, it's almost like time traveling, because I have this knowledge that my grandmother would have had. She had an abortion in the 30s. Or, the women who had abortions before Roe v. Wade, when you talk to them, their narratives, a lot of them revolve around how painful it was. They talk about pain. They don't talk about regret. Really. Some might. Some talk about sadness. But, I've talked to a lot of women, a lot of older women who had abortions in the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s. And like, to a person, whatever else their narrative contains, they always talk about how painful it was. And it really is kind of mind-blowing to think about the amount of pain we were expected to undergo, and how in some ways Roe v. Wade represents this escape from it. You don't have to be penalized. You don't have to suffer bringing life into this world. You can choose your suffering. You can moderate it. You can confront it. You can do anything you want with it. It's your pain. It's your pain to manage. But if you don't want to feel pain, you don't have to feel pain. And that's big. And I kind of, I just think about that, the pain we felt, and like how it's this thing that in some ways we're in flight from, but how it's also this thing that millions of women worldwide suffer all the time. Do you know what I'm saying? It's a link with the past. It's an experience I had that links me with lots of women worldwide. It was a weird kind of archaic experience to have. Yeah, I definitely, I think about that a lot. And again, I'm grateful to myself for delivering myself from the notion that I should become a mother, because what was really apparent to me at that point was like, I'm not a mother. I have absolutely no intention of life passing through my body and coming into being in the world. I can nurture people. I love my husband very much. I love my sister. I love the people in my life. I'm not a mother. And I had no interest in giving over all of my emotional time, all of my psychic time, my physical time, my cognitive time to the care and upkeep of another human being. It's a big job. You have to want to do it. And I didn't know it at the time, and I wasn't really able to put it into words, because at points I would be like, do I want a child? Am I going to be a mother? Whatever. And I realized now that my ambivalence was kind of the answer. It was like, no, you're really so much more interested in growing as a human being, and you have so much more work to do to grow as a human being. And in any case, even if you were the most mature, which I obviously wasn't, 28 or 29-year-old, you don't want to be a mother. You don't want those things. And I also want to say something, this is getting very tangential, but I also want to say something about the issue of immaturity. I was physically capable of having kids. Like, the women in my family are reproductively, we could populate the earth. We're very successful with this. There's late births in my family. There's multiple births. My mom gave birth 5 times. She came through like a champ, it was all good. So physically, I was always capable. But I was very immature for a very long time. And so when you say immature, you're like, what is that word? What does that word really mean? Does it mean you throw temper tantrums? Does it mean that you throw things? Does it mean that you act like a 6-year-old? What does it mean that you're immature? And it to me, it's like you don't have the capacity to really be connected to another person the way a parent could be, or connected to a child. And you were immature. You were physically mature. You were emotionally immature. You were emotionally unfinished. You had a longer growing spurt psychically and spiritually than some people. There's some women out there that can mother when they're 15, and they can do it, and they do it. Or they're 19 and they do it. They have what it takes. They have that capacity. Maybe they're lacking something else, but they can mother. And with me, my, journey to adulthood has just been longer. There's a longer gradual growing, phase of growing that I needed to really commit to. And I hate to think of what it would have been like had I stopped that emotional progress to answer the idea that I should mother simply because I was too stupid to use birth control. I would, that would have been a grievous error. So, so I've had 2 other abortions, and I've had 4 abortions, and this is hard to say publicly because you're not supposed to have 4 abortions. You're not supposed to talk about having 4 abortions. I can't even begin to tell you how part of me is really freaked out that I'm saying this. You're just not supposed to. The women that I know who have had multiple abortions are typically on the other side of the argument. In fact, in the Bay Area, the only other woman I know who's had 4 abortions and speaks about it publicly, I think her name is Star Jones, and she shows up to the anti-choice Walk for Life every January, and she talks about her 4 abortions. She does so because she wants to see abortion criminalized, but she gets to talk about it. She's publicly able to talk about her journey. Now, she's using that journey to punish other women who are on the same path. But I think about her all the time. She's had that experience. What was that like for her? What does it mean? Does it just mean we were really fertile? Were we victims of I don't know what her story is. I have absolutely no idea. But I, in some senses, I really envy the free rhetorical space she occupies because she can talk about it. And I really I'm not doing I'm not really doing the pro-choice movement in its current sort of middle of the road, Democrat loving form any favors when I talk about having 4 abortions just because I did not use birth control. That's a no-no. You're not supposed to do that. You cannot be effective if you are that person. And that's embittering. That's hard. I don't know what that means. I think that it's like that should be able to claim some form of perfection or something, some something, but I can't, I could never really find myself a home within the reproductive rights, reproductive justice, reproductive health movement because I'm a fuck up. Do you know what I'm saying? And I think about that a lot. So I was at a training, a training something like a year and a half ago. And we were all in a big room and we were all kind of being guided through these exercises designed to find out what are our personal values? What do we think? And one of the questions was, how would you feel about a person who had multiple abortions? And would you feel negatively? Would you feel neutrally? Would you feel positively? Like, how would it make you feel? And half the room went to the negative side of all these women, and this was a diverse crowd, went to the other side of the room. And oh my God, I was like, oh, that did not feel good. I was just like, holy shit. And then what really made me feel even worse was this one woman who was a sex ed educator was like, she basically was like, yes, this would make me feel really negatively about this woman. And she was just going on and saying, it's like I've talked to these women and they don't listen and they don't learn. And she was talking about like the women in this really fucking condescending way. Like they were dumbasses. And I was outraged because I was a dumbass. You know what I mean? Like I grew up when birth control was really easy to get. And yes, 4 times in my life I didn't use it. And 4 times in my life I got knocked up. And 4 times in my life I had an abortion. But I am not a dumbass. I'm not a fucking idiot. I made a mistake, but I am not a fucking idiot and I'm not a child. And the way she was talking about these women that just refused to learn, I started really tuning into the conversation then about white privilege, even though I'm white, because to me, that was the sound of white privilege talking. These women just refused to learn. It makes me emotional thinking about it. I was so pissed. And I kept it together, but I was really angry. And I stepped to the center of the room and I don't even remember what I said now. But I basically was like, this is bullshit. And the reproductive justice movement has got to make rhetorical room for women who've had more than one abortion, because I can tell you right now, there are a lot of us. Not just the one woman who has her one polite abortion. There's a lot of women with sex lives and they have lots of children and maybe they have lots of miscarriages and they've had 4 abortions or they've had 3 or they've had 12, but you guys have to make room for them. You have to make room for them. It isn't right and it's not fair to constrict the speaking and rhetorical space that is currently constricted in that way. It's not right. And if there was one thing I would like to see change in the movement, and I don't even know what I mean by the movement, it's a huge term. I would like to see that change. I would like to be, I'm doing it right now. You're making this space available for me, and it's fearful for me. I'll be totally honest with you. Part of me is like, fuck. You know what I mean? Oh my God, I'm going to end up on some anti-choice website and then my friends are going to find out and maybe my mom and maybe my Christian cousin. And it's just like, you don't want to deal with judgment. You don't want to be threatened. And I carry that fear within me. I really do. I've never been very honest about it. But this is stigma, right? Stigma silences people and it shuts them up. So me talking about having had multiple abortions, it doesn't mean that I don't want to examine it minutely, because of course I do, and I do it all the time. But it happened, and at some level, you have to believe that you're not a bad person who has done something irreparable to the fabric of life. And it's hard to land that belief and have it wake up inside yourself if there's stigma attached to it and your voice is silenced. So I thought maybe I had a lot more to say, but I think that was my manifesto.
You talked about this this stark difference between the first time you had an abortion and then like the climate or like the way that you felt about the space around abortion the second time. Mm-hmm. You didn't talk about the third and the fourth time, so I'm just wondering,
because they were, yeah,
because you were at home that second time. You didn't even bother going to the clinic. So when you went to this third and fourth time, how was that space for you?
Well, I mean, the space was fine. It wasn't contested politically. So in other words, there were no screaming bodies to move through because it was much later.
And I think that's interesting. Yeah.
I think it's really interesting. Well, let's face it, there's a couple of things. The first thing is, like, for the third time, I'm a white woman with insurance who's going to a hospital. Bam. The shield of privilege. You know what I mean? The hospitals could be picketed, but I don't think they really ever were. It's the freestanding clinics that bear the brunt. Those are working class women, women who are temporarily have no money, like myself. The way that I've been, sometimes I've had more money, sometimes I've had less money. But, the third time it was in a hospital, and it was like, those are kind of sacrosanct in a way. And it was covered by healthcare. It was covered by my then partner's insurance, which I'm all of a sudden finding interesting. We didn't pay out of pocket for that. What was that health insurance? I don't remember. Wow. And I didn't really ever put that together. And then the fourth time I went to Planned Parenthood, and it was downstream of the total clinic craziness, although clinic craziness still happens and doctors still get killed. George Tiller was killed 2003, 4, 5, 6. George Tiller was killed 5 or 6 years after my last one. So but it had sort of gone away as a thing that was happening all the time. It wasn't topical any longer. It was simply institutionalized. So it was still happening, but I lived in San Francisco. The second time I went, it was notable that this crazy, hateful violence in front of clinics was happening in San Francisco. It was totally counter to this city's progressive traditions. So yeah, I feel like there's different reasons for the different atmospheres and environments for each one, and I think they all, yeah, they're all just very, very different. Yeah.
So, what led you to go to a hospital as opposed to a clinic?
I honestly don't. I swear to God. Why did we go to? Well, it's St. Luke's, which is over there at Valencia and Cesar Chavez. And for some reason, I always went to St. Luke's because I lived in the Mission, and SF General is like, SF General it's a general county hospital, so it's crazy. And thank God for St. Luke's. I went to St. Luke's because I think they took my husband's insurance, or my partner's insurance. And because I think that's where my GP was, and the two just kind of combined. And it was just because, yeah, that's probably why, because I had a GP there, and that's totally why. Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't attach the whole sort of the thing between should it be in a freestanding clinic, should it be in a hospital, which you would be surprised. People who want to see abortion remain legal will sometimes be like, but it should be in the hospital. It shouldn't be in a freestanding clinic. They have ideas about how that stigmatizes the operation itself. And then there's other people that are like, that's bullshit. You know what I mean? And I kind of think at the bottom of it is, I think that the freestanding clinics like Women's Choice or, the Jacksonville Clinic, those serve working class women who are indigent, women who don't have means. And like hospitals, I don't think St. Luke's is universally available to everyone, right? Yeah. I think the people that make the case for abortion staying as a procedure in a hospital are losing sight of the fact that a hospital itself is a formality that some women just don't have access to. You can't just walk into a hospital and get what you need, but you can walk into Women's Choice and get what you need. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Yeah.
When you were needing to get an abortion, how were you able to access it? Like, how did you know where to go?
That's a really good question. Jesus, how did I know? Well, in Newport Beach, I bet I knew because another friend had gone to the clinic and had an abortion. So probably word of mouth. The second time I had my abortion, that was a women's self-help group. And I probably found out about it the way that people in the olden days found out about Jane, the referral service. You know, women talk with each other. People talk. And I don't know how I found out about that either. It was San Francisco. It's a wildly progressive. It was a wildly progressive place, and I probably knew the right people that were like, there's like a women's self-help group who will help you, who will basically do like an early menstrual extraction on you, and you don't have to go to the clinic. So a lot of time it's probably just informal sharing, and then of course Planned Parenthood. I've been going to Planned Parenthood. To get like my birth control, because I did use birth control. And I knew about Planned Parenthood. I mean, really the interesting Planned Parenthood was the most thing that I always knew about. Now, why did I know about Planned Parenthood in Orange County, California? Because it wasn't stigmatized. Everyone went there to get their birth control. It was, again, kind of a rite of passage. When you became sexually active, you and your best bud went to the Planned Parenthood on Harbor, and you walked in and you got your packet of pills. And that's just the informal network of people, kind of raising each other and telling each other what it is you do. And I like to think that my mom had something to do with that too, because she's really a wonderful woman. And I've never had this exact discussion. She knows I've had abortions. We've never really sat down and talked shop, but and I think we're both fine with that. That isn't a lack of communication. She was always so sane and decent about, and she still is, happily, she's still alive, about birth control. It wasn't a big deal. I mean, it wasn't a big deal. My grandmother had an illegal abortion, what would have been an illegal abortion in the 30s. She and my grandfather had no money. So she had an abortion. And this is a story that I like to tell. When my mom was pregnant with my little sister, that was kid number 5. And my dad owned a bookstore. You don't get rich owning a bookstore. It's really hard to raise a family of 5 in a bookstore. You know what I mean? It's like this, genteel kind of poverty. And my grandmother said to my mom, you could have an abortion. It would be less of a strain. And I don't know that my mom considered it, but it was just the kind of, it was just matter of fact, like, this is an option. You could do this. It was still illegal. But because we were, because we had privilege, we had economic privilege, my mom could have gone to a doctor and gotten an abortion and probably survived it. Ways of knowing.
Also.
Yeah.
Because you kind of breezed past some things. So I just wanted to ask.
I know. It's just like, woo. I was really having an emotional reaction to the anger I feel at having to not being able to talk freely and not being able to open up about it. It sucks. It's not fun. It is some kind of a closet. You can't really, people, you know what I mean? It is a kind of a closet. It is. Yeah. And it's hard kind of moving out of that. Even though in my real life, if I'm not, recording something, you can't shut me up about stuff. You should ask my sisters. It'll be like, oh, we know all about it. But this is a little different. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So my other question is.
Ask.
Did you just know, like, that was, you were going to have an abortion?
We just knew. It was not dramatic. There was never any, I never really, Yes, the partner knew. Yes, there would have been a conversation. Frankly, I didn't give a shit what they thought because I was like, no one ever wanted me to keep it. I did have one pointless argument with boyfriend number 3, who was pissed at me for scheduling the appointment as quickly as I did. I was like, "Are you kidding?" No. I was like, I just remember thinking like, "Oh, I'm breaking up with you," because he had like attitude. He had opinions about me like scheduling, and it was like, no, you're along for the ride. I just was. I mean, it was clear to me that our relationship was on the rocks because he was just being a petty idiot. So stupid. And but that was really the only kind of like thing, the drama that I remember. I was never in a position where someone wanted me to have it. I think everyone knew. I was like, she probably shouldn't have children. She doesn't want to be a mother. This is not what her life is about. And so what they thought or felt or said wasn't really registering with me. I was motivated by a sense of urgency. And so, yeah, for a lot of women, their partner's story is part of the story. For me, not so much. After I married my husband, we had one pregnancy scare. We were using birth control, but for some reason I was like, oh shit, I think I'm pregnant. I just got it into my head that maybe I was. And then then I finally kind of had like the conversation with the male partner who was really invested. That was interesting, But these were not relationships that were lifelong. And I knew these were not men that I was going to partner with for the rest of my life. So they're not really a part of my story. It's notable and interesting that of all of the men, all 4 of them total have contributed to far more pregnancies than I've aborted. Like one of the men had basically participated in 6 abortions. And another one had participated in 3. And then another one had 2. And in talking to a lot of my male friends, what is interesting to me is that there's stigma around having multiple abortions when you're a woman. But man, you check into men's sexual history and you get to know how many abortions they've participated in. It's a lot. It's a lot. And I wanted, back in 2003, when the Walk for Life started happening, I wanted my progressive male friends to like wear T-shirts saying I've had 12 abortions, or I've had 6, or I've had 4, because I started querying my male friends, like, how many abortions have you participated in? How many times have you gotten a woman pregnant? And I was really gobsmacked at like how high the number was. The lowest number was 4, and it was more often like 7. You know what I mean? It's mind blowing.
Why do you want to share your story?
I want to share my story because it is a stigmatized procedure. I do believe that uncovering popular histories, recording them, and institutionalizing them will help. I am a big believer in talking story. I'm a writer. I'm a researcher. I believe in bringing up the great underbelly of untold story and working with it and weaving a new understanding and a new fabric from it. I believe that the right to be a mother and the right to have an abortion are interlinked, and they are part of the same fabric. They are associated. They're deeply, deeply associated. Everything that we can do with our reproductive capacities, wherever they are, it's all associated. But we can make those associations explicit if we tell story with each other and we listen.
This is Melissa. Thanks again for listening. You can continue to listen to our stories online through our website by subscribing on iTunes or SoundCloud or your favorite podcast app. And if you rate and review our podcast on iTunes, it helps new listeners find us by boosting our iTunes ranking. And remember, the Abortion Diary needs your support. Help the Abortion Diary continue its work and share our stories by donating, and consider supporting us with a monthly gift. Thank you to Liza for hosting me in Oakland, California, so I could record this story. If you'd like to host me in your city or town, please send me a message. I'm currently in Toronto, Canada, and look forward to visiting your city or town soon. I'll be back next week with a new story. New stories are posted every Tuesday. Until then, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram. Listen for us next week.